Good morning, everyone. My name is Jillian Finkel, and I am the Deputy Director of GrowSmart Rhode Island and the Director of Main Street Rhode Island. And as I think Scott mentioned this morning, Main Street is really an approach that was developed with our walkable, traditionally developed commercial districts in mind. And certainly Rhode Island has lots of places that benefit from this approach. So think of all of our neighborhood commercial centers, our village centers, our smaller downtowns, and our other traditional business corridors, some of which are actually called Main Street. But as we've been rolling out the program, I was also being asked whether the Main Street approach could be applied in places that aren't traditional Main Street districts, especially those all too familiar wide commercial strip roads. People were saying they wanted to make them more Main Streety, right? And at the same time, we've been hearing more and more conversations about, potential redevelopment of places that maybe are no longer serving us as well as they could be, and that maybe some of these car-centric corridors that often serve as transit routes might actually represent great opportunities to build denser housing and help address our housing crisis. Doesn't that sound an awful lot like a smart growth problem? So, of course, Rhode Island isn't the only place to be asking these questions and having these discussions, and it turned out that people around the country have been talking for years about retrofitting suburbia and repairing sprawl. So we decided to bring one of these people here to talk to us about it, and we found someone who literally wrote the book on it. The Sprawl Repair Manual is an award-winning publication by Island Press, which focuses on the retrofit of auto-centric suburban places into complete walkable communities. And it was written by today's keynote speaker, Galina Tachieva. There's also postcards outside if you want to order a copy of her book. So Galina is the managing partner of DPZ Co-Design, directing the work of the firm in the US and around the world. Galina and DPZ are no stranger to Rhode Island. They were involved in charrettes about downtown Providence in the 1990s and the early 2000s. So Galina has more than 25 years of experience in sustainable planning, urban redevelopment, and form-based codes. She is multilingual and has experience with complex projects across the United States, Latin America, Europe, and Russia, including downtown and urban revitalization, regional plans, environmental conservation, new communities, and resort towns. She has led charrettes and other public processes from project initiation through implementation. Galina is a fellow of the Congress for the New Urbanism, and she has been leading its National Sprawl Retrofit Initiative. She is the founding member of the Council for European Urbanism, and she has lectured throughout the world. So she's born and raised in Bulgaria. She received her architectural education at the University of Architecture, Civil Engineering, and Geodesy in Sofia, Bulgaria, and later she received her master's degree in urban planning from the University of Miami School of Architecture. Galina is certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners and is a LEED accredited professional. So we are beyond thrilled to have her with us today. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the stage Galina Tachieva.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Jillian, for the great introduction. It's a late morning, but here we go. Wow, these colors were quite something, and I'm happy that I contributed to your very colorful page of your organization. I'm very, very honored to be here in this amazing auditorium, in this amazing college at RISD, in this amazing neighborhood, and in this amazing city. I'm also excited, very excited, and I'm also nervous because I just noticed that everybody before me, they had some notes, and I just decided to do it on a kind of to improvise. So let's see what will happen. But anyway, I just, I apologize for the length of the bio. It's too long. I mean, that's number one. And then number two, I actually heard recently something about the more accomplished is a person, the shorter the bio. So we have to work on that, I guess. But if you want me to say one sentence about my bio, is Galina is an urban planner or an urban designer. actually. That's it. That's probably the most important thing. And what it means that we are, people like me, urban designers, are actually concerned about the physical environment. We look at the physical environment, we look at human settlements, and we try to make them better. And this is how the title of this talk came about. Fix the places and keep the people, kind of the shortest, basically expressing what I will try to talk about today in the shortest way. The thing is that I'm also humbled by the project which we just saw, the awards. So I don't know what I'm going to tell you, whether it's something, there will not be too much new, because you have already accomplished a lot. I don't know where this comes from, the whatever low esteem, the Rhode Island low esteem or something. I heard some, talk about that. You should be proud of your tiny but mighty state, I would say. And as physical as physical designers, we usually, when we go to a place and do some work, we usually start with learning about the place, and we like to come and to live for a while and all of that. I didn't have this opportunity about, Rhode Island in general, but I have been here with our project with Down City Providence a few times. I have been here, but not too much around the state. So I had to do a little bit of research, and I'm so grateful to Scott and Caroline and Jillian and Toby and Evelyn, the whole Smart Growth, Grow Smart Rhode Island team, who gave me some pointers, and they gave me some, SWOT analysis and all of that. So my head is full of statistics. But I'm not going to put it on there, but now it will be a test where I remember what I learned. And there are some really quite amazing facts, actually. And these facts are that, well, it will be good if this moves, but it doesn't. The facts are, probably I need to turn it on. But, okay, well, it doesn't. Oh, this is maybe? I was told just press the green, but it doesn't change. Anyway, I can talk. So basically, Rhode Island is the smallest state in the country, but it's also one of the densest, which was a kind of a surprise for me, because I have always imagined Rhode Island is very green, very forested, and all of that. And to no surprise, because you're also on a very high on the list about forests, and the project which we just saw with the award, bringing the forest in the city, to make an urban forest or to extend the forested features of your state to the city is quite amazing. It's a great thing to do, and to the neighborhoods which don't have the greenery. I mean, here if you walk around College Hill neighborhood, is just like amazing. The trees make a lot of the beauty of the place. And so this density or this urbanity which you have, the urban part of your state is something to treasure. You have one of the urban cores, or the most urban cities in New England, for that matter, Providence. You have also small cities. I learned the Newport is called a small city. It's not a small town. And you have plenty of small towns which have incredible urban fabric and historic buildings and all of these things which you probably know a lot about, much more than I do. But as urban designer, it's like we always admire such features, and we try to put them up front and start with them, basically with the good bones of places. You also have an incredible countryside. You have 1,200 farms, which is also an amazing statistics for me. So this combination of urbanity, countryside and nature close by, and then the farms is also amazing, because you're so compact, you can easily go from very urban to nature to countryside, and not to even mention the coastline, which is 400 miles, and it's more than California coastline, which I was also shocked to learn, but that's a fact. So this amazing combination of features, geography and natural resources, and then the urbanity of your places is absolutely almost unparalleled, I would say. Our office, DPZ Co-Design, we're in Miami, so it's a different world out there. So it's like when we come to places like this, we just really appreciate the compactness. And the good news is that you haven't sprawled as much as you could, actually. So these are the, not to even mention the civic institutions, your organizations, the civic buildings. So, oh, okay, it wasn't, I guess, it's fine now. The civic institutions, you know, close by the big, incredible state courthouse, amazing, and you know the state capitol, which I learned. I mean, again, I'm doing my trivia, not trivia. It's like this is amazing statistics, which I hope you know that your dome, the marble dome, is the largest, the fourth largest in the world, which I was also surprised to learn. And it's after St. Peter's and Minnesota and Taj Mahal, and then you're next. You know, basically the self-holding marble. It just, this is for me as an architect and urban designer, is just amazing, and you have to showcase more of that. Of course, as Jillian mentioned, you know, we have done work, our office has done work in Providence, and we are so proud to be connected to this process which you had started even before we showed up. You know, DPZ, and it was even before my time with the company, came here for the first time in 1992, and then we came regularly every so often, and we collaborated with all of the community, with the city staff, with politicians, with the businesses, with all stakeholders which are interested in a better vision for your great city. And basically what we had to do was not that difficult, because you already had a jewel. You had like a diamond, and we just had to polish it and to point, okay, look, you have these incredible streets, you have this fabric, you know, of incredible historic heritage, which you have to basically return to life. And this is what you have been doing for the last almost 40 years. And these are just like initial drawings. I mean, these are drawings, I think, from 2004. But then it was important, even in the first round in 1992, to point at the urban fabric, and also to point at the methodology which we learned here, and then we have started implementing in many other places. And this is the idea of primary and secondary streets, that you cannot, in a city or in a small town, you cannot require to have all the streets wonderful and beautiful, that you can have some of excellent quality, but you have to have some which are for other things, whether it's for servicing, for loading, for whatever other reasons, you know. But a city it has to be designed in its entirety, with the thinking that some places will be extraordinary. And this is something which we learned here in Providence. And also another thing which we learned here is that a great city like this, or a small town for that matter, doesn't need like a silver bullet solution, doesn't need like one big thing, whether it's a Guggenheim Museum, or it's like one of these, you know, like one thing. They do one thing and they think that this will solve the problems, or will make the city visible. But you can have to make many different small steps towards an incremental basically improvement of a place, and we learned this here. And that's a drawing about you know, existing and proposed buildings and where you can intervene. And the thing is that whenever we draw, we're careful, because here in Providence we learned that, you know, drawings actually matter. You know, this is the existing condition, and that's a drawing, and actually it happened. And that's something which we learned, and we would like to alert you that what you draw is something important. Not to mention that sometimes engineers, you know, draw very big roads, and then they're taken for granted. They have to be basically first represented in 3 dimensions in order for people to kind of have a 3-dimensional idea. and this is Providence today. I don't need to, talk more about it, but we're absolutely happy to come here and see the results of your very hard work over the years. Yes, I mentioned the small cities. Again, these are images from from the internet, and we are always admiring those images. A small city which has kept actually its charm, its history. It has all the things going for it, but also there are practical lessons. So practical lessons which can be learned by doing very mundane things, like going and measuring. What is the width of the street? What is the proportion between the height of the buildings and the width of the street? What are the materials? What are the depth and the size of the awnings and things like that, which they may seem, kind of technical and maybe something which you don't need to pay attention to, but they make a place. Some of these things like proportions of the openings, proportions of windows and things like that, and roofs. So all of these physical elements make the complex organism of a real place. One other thing to mention, another statistics which now escaped from me, but it was about that you have an economy in which you have some big players like CVS or some of these other business giants, but also you have a lot of local businesses. And here maybe you see Banana Republic, but then you have a whole range of smaller local businesses. Your main streets and many other places can become incubators of the local small business entrepreneur. And this picture I like because you see different modes of movement. You can have some motorcycles, of course bicyclists, maybe some cars, but also pedestrians who will feel much better protected by cars which are parked or cars which move very slowly. If the streets are wide and you have multiple lanes, then of course people don't feel very protected. Hope Street in Bristol, this one is also very interesting because it kept the historic size or the historic proportions between the buildings, because you have some historic buildings on both sides, which of course, thanks God, they were not taken down, or the street was not, tremendously enlarged. And then I found by a chance the historic building, the historic Hopes. So do you see this building over there? Now this doesn't work for some reason. This building here is the building right there. So, and you see the steps. So it's like so much of the heritage, and this is from the 17th century or something like that, 17th, 18th century. This has actually stayed for so many decades because it has a value, and also today Bristol has a great street. This one showed the beauty. Basically, that's the main street, a kind of an extension in the more residential areas with the trees. And I know that these are the beautiful Dutch elms, and they were, there was a disease or there was like some kind of a blight. But I'm really congratulating you for continuing to plant trees, and with this award which we just saw, and all the new trees which we are seeing, being planted all around Providence downtown. Last night we were looking at some of the kind of newly planted maple trees, and they looked absolutely fabulous, even if they are young. But the tree, there is never too early to plant a tree. It has to be today to be able, in a few decades, the next generation to have great streets. Okay, so these were some of the good news, and then some of the not so good news, with one statistics which I want to start with, that one, that 77% of all residents in Rhode Island, which is, I think it's quite an amazing statistic, live 10 minutes away from public transit, but only 3% use it for commuting to work. So that's a kind of it was a stunning statistics. And unfortunately, your wonderful, beautiful, very poetic state, because Ocean State, I mean, what a name. That's like almost poetry. Unfortunately, has succumbed to some of the trends which have been in the country since the late 40s. You know, in the 50s when we built the federal highway system and when we sprawled tremendously because of the kind of the ubiquitous presence of the car. We thought that we have all the freedom and we can, you know, build places, residences and retail and shopping centers and all that far away from our kind of main transportation corridors. And this is what happened. So you have, you know, shopping malls, and you have too much asphalt, and you have tons of shopping centers. Another statistic is you have between 80 and 100, 120 of these basically shopping commercial strips, which are potential main streets. But this is also something which I want to point out, that you have to be very, very careful which ones you think that you can main streety, you know, make them like main streets. That's also something important. And also to accept that some streets will be secondary streets, or like a B street, you know, not the primary, but they will remain secondary. And of course, there is a lot of unused parking. Parking actually is a kind of a little bit part of the good news about our sprawling communities, because it is already land which has been denatured, drained most likely, with some utilities, and we have about 8 million acres in this country, surface parking lots. Can you believe it? 8 million. I did a little calculation, and I figured out that this is about I think 10 Rhode Islands. 10 or 12, it's unbelievable. You know, this is, I mean, talking about surface parking all around the country. So if you do these statistics about Rhode Island, you will find that there is a lot of this, it's like a depository of potential real estate development and redevelopment, infill and all of that. And you can put all the housing you need. You can put affordable housing, you can put you know, market housing, you can put a lot of other stuff on these parking lots. Another thing which comes to mind, and I forgot to mention it yesterday, and I'm about to forget today, but I'm not, because it's extremely important, is about the brain drain. You know, that's also something which is in the air, and you have 8 universities and 8 hospitals, and I believe it's only it's just, you know, within the Providence, you know, the city of Providence, and that's an amazing wealth, and you have an amazing, you know, number of graduates graduating, and some of them are going north, some of them are going southwest, and we know where they're going, maybe for some better jobs, better paid jobs, and all of that, but they're also going there for a maybe better environment, because they cannot afford the small towns, historic towns. They probably cannot afford some of, you know, the best places in Providence. They cannot afford other places, so they are going there also for urbanism. Also because they like places which are vital and which are diverse and which are, you know, basically hopping with life. And here I will make a little something, kind of a veering off the road. You know, I said that your name, the Ocean State, is so poetic, talking about poetry. Wallace Stevens, one of the greatest American poets, said that life is in the mind. And I love that. You know, I love it. You know, life is in the mind. You know, whatever you have in your mind, that's basically your life. However, we're physical designers, and we talk about the physical environment, and we cannot tell our younger generation, oh, have your life in your mind. We have to provide for them a better place to live, and not only to provide it for them, but we also have to include them in the economic opportunity of building it, maybe building it themselves, maybe participating in the process, maybe participating in the economic opportunity which redevelopment and more housing and more affordability brings to your state. So that's what I wanted not to miss, to say. Here, 3 generations of suburbs, and you have very similar situation, and I'm not going to dwell too long on that. The book, it's in the book, Sprawl Repair Manual, and I wrote this book 15 years ago. So it's a long time ago, and for all these years, there are many, many examples around the country of retrofitting and repairing sprawl. But basically what happened is that in the early 40s, up to the early 40s, actually we were growing along railroads and along trajectories where we couldn't spread around, because when you go to your station or a streetcar, streetcars and railroads, then you had to basically walk to your place. So everything, all the urbanism was the benevolent kind of urbanism at that point. Then afterwards, 40s and the 70s, when we started building our highways, then we started basically sprawling. The second generation of suburbs, we started sprawling along our highways, because with a car, I'm going to my house on the highway, and then I can, drive further into my subdivision, and then the residential, a lot of the residential communities, they moved out of the city for various reasons, not only because of the highways, but for a variety of reasons. The GI Bill, segregation. It's like a political, economic, and environmental, more or less a disaster, what we made within our country. And actually, we exported this model all around the world, unfortunately. Because you still can have the highways, which provide probably the best, trucking in the world, the best shipping and delivering and all of that. But the communities which we build along these places, they're not complete communities. They're just the separate elements of living and shopping and working in different single-use developments. And then in the 80s was a kind of, the picture is like that. And you were spared to some extent of the worst of the worst. As I said, our office is in Florida, so we have seen all around the state a really tremendous sprawling, and all around other states. However, many of your suburban types are very similar. They're very, very similar to everything which is around the country. And here it's just, that's kind of the national model. Where we were, this is Savannah, Georgia, up to a kind of the walkable and complete urbanism of before the car became our helper in life. And then the fragmented development, the drivable sprawl, where we basically become very, very dependent on the car. How do you go to a mall? You have to drive. And by doing that, by building this type of developments, we eliminate almost half of the population. The younger and the very old and the sick and many of the poor people who don't have cars. So we basically eliminated half of the population by making all these communities which are entirely car dependent. And in our practice, we do not necessarily eliminate the car. The car, you saw it even in the 18th century, whenever the cars were, or early 20th century when the cars were there. They were there, they were parked, and cars were moving around, but there was benevolence and walkability which was available to everybody. Here, this is usually what we usually do as a kind of almost like an analysis or like a medical diagnosis. This is again Bristol, and showing fabrics, showing blocks, showing public space. Here, Hope Street, this is High Street. You see different building types, civic amenities, all these things which a real complete community will have. And then you see this. This is not cheaper, not better, it's gigantic species, like some kind of an animal which landed on your really poetic, small, beautiful state. And this one actually, the Lincoln Commons, which doesn't have any commons, if you ask me, is one of the kind of the representative models which we have about 1,200 in this country. Here in Rhode Island, you have probably, because you are very compact geography, you have a very compact, also a kind of condensed history of suburbanization. And when you look at your malls, it's a very interesting story, starting with the Arcade, which was one of the, not one, the first enclosed galleria, basically enclosed mall, but an urban one, which can be actually a wonderful, it is a wonderful amenity, for the city, and it's such a beautiful building that it can go through many, many iterations and adaptations and still be very wanted. I just heard that the micro units they're actually condominiums, and they're reselling for some, insane prices. And it has also small businesses and all of that. This is amazing. And that was the kind of, the kind of mall you want. It's a small scale and all of that. And then the next generation were the bigger ones, things like Warwick Mall and others. I will show some of that. And then you have also the Providence Place, which is trying to reinvent itself, and it has gone down and died and whatever. It's in receivership, whatever happened to it, it's like a whole story there. And then you have some which are thinking that they are redeveloping or reinventing themselves, but they just become like life centers, which is still only millions of square feet of retail. So these are some drawings from my book, Shopping Center, which is existing, and what you can have if you infill, if you urbanize. Of course, this is a kind of a radical and aspirational view of a shopping center repair. This also shows how, you accommodate the cars. Everybody will say, oh, where did the parking lots go? Well, you put them in garages if they're still circulating around in, let's say, in the next decade. We hear about autonomous vehicles, and this is something which may or may not do great good to urbanity. We have investigated and talked about it, at least in the circles of people who are concerned with smart growth and new urbanism and all of that. And if they become reality, first we may have more cars circulating, but we may have less because people will be able to have a subscription with a car or something like that. And then you will not need to accommodate the car right where you live or right where you shop or right where you work. Right now, as I mentioned, the 8 million acres, they may shrink and they may open these, parking lots, they may open for redevelopment. But see here, the principles are basically you connect the streets, you connect some of these mega blocks which were in the prior one with decent streets which actually create real estate frontage. This is sellable and developable land. Whether the buildings are, 4 stories or high density or 1 or 2 stories, that depends on the context. This actually happens to be in Florida. And then you create public spaces, whether they are a big square or smaller pocket parks. That's also depending on the context. Another big thing is mixed use. You just discover what you are missing. If it's a shopping center, you have plenty of shopping, and the shopping is probably going down and all of that. So you complement it with the living component, the residential or office or lodging or whatever else you need in your community. The mall, the shopping mall, the existing and the proposed. And I will talk about a mall of, one of your malls. So this is like a generic thing. But I also wanted to say that this is not, 15 years ago, this was something like, almost like, oh yeah, it's out there, maybe it's not gonna happen. But it has been happening. As a matter of fact, Simon Property Group, the largest mall developer in the world, they have like 400 properties around the country and also outside of the United States. About 40% of their malls, they have been rethinking them, and they implemented about a huge amount of a kind of mixed use reinvention of their purely retail entities, which is something to say. If he's doing it, if Simon is doing it, that probably is the right thing to do. One project of theirs is very impressive. It's called The Domain outside of Austin, which is has become a really almost like a secondary downtown for their sprawl to the north of Austin. This one I wanted to show, it is not here, it is not on Rhode Island, but it's next door in Massachusetts, Cape Cod, Mashpee Commons, and just as an example that this has been done very close to you. And this is an old shopping center built in the 60s and then recovered, started to be recovered in the early 80s, and it has been taking many, many years, and a kind of the tenacity and the legacy and multi-generations from Cornish associates to redo this place into a really a kind of a place which looks like New England, feels like New England, brings in residential and many other uses. I was actually so surprised to hear about all the things which are not only retail. It's not only just, shoes and shampoo and all of that, but it's also things to do. And then that's another thing to have in mind. It's basically a very recent trend that in the United States, more than 50% of the retail, which we perceive as retail and shopping, more than 50% is not anymore retail. It's actually services. And they're in the wellness industry, they're in a kind of self-care industry, in all these things which we are doing today. I just remember one thing from an article. They were saying, today we are buying more Botox and kickboxing classes and boxing classes more than shoes and shampoo or something like this, or bags and boots. So it was like an interesting thing to think about. And actually in Mashpee Commons, you have a yoga studio and the Pilates studio and one juice place and a second juice place and organic this, and it's just like many things, small businesses which are next to, to some of the larger things. This is a small square which was created. These were basically big boxes which were kind of punctured or cut through with smaller streets and for pedestrian quality. And I just want you to remember this square. This is how it looks, a little fountain, the kids, the families are there. So now it's the meat of my presentation. I hope that I'm not superbly behind. So I'm going to show basically 3 examples here on Rhode Island and what can be done with them. And I want a disclaimer that this was not done in a collaborative method. DPZ co-design means that we are collaborators. Co means collaboration, and we collaborate with local stakeholders, with the community, neighbors, developers, city officials, with elected officials, the staff, etc., etc. Local experts of the place, because we cannot learn everything about the place in a short period of time. So we work together. So these things I have basically done looking at, 30,000 feet, from above, and like what can be done, thinking a little bit out of the box, maybe thinking a little bit more radical and also more aspirational, but also thinking proactively. Some of these sprawl types, whether they are a shopping center or a mall, they don't need to be dead and killing your, everything in your neighborhood and being like an eyesore before you do something, And Warwick Mall actually is one of those. It's not dead. It is a kind of more or less thriving. Oh, this is the location. Usually, it's in a very good location between several highways, so it's really a very well located for a mall, and right there. And then here it is, the 295, and then the I-95, and you see it here, very similar to the mall which I showed you before. I heard that there is some maybe flooding around this area, and you have the Macy's and JCPenney. I still think that these are the current tenants. if they are. They, change, but this is, this is good that the mall is, having some thinking about reinvention. And you see that the parking lot is quite big, a medical building here and an Apple Cinemas, which are struggling. And so the idea was that these total of 65 acres, the site of the mall is 65 acres. This is like a neighborhood. This is basically a perfect walkable neighborhood in a traditional town. It's unbelievable how large this place have become. And in these 65 acres, you have the mall, you have it's very clean. I hope this kid is with his parents. And, the parking lot, the parking lots, which are basically the same everywhere, whether they're in Florida, you have more trees, that's for sure. And you have we figured that's maybe the Independent Man. And they have the carousel, which is one of the actually the first carousel was invented in Rhode Island. Another trivia I learned. So the carousel is for free on Wednesdays. So they're doing like non-conventional things, and they have pop-up little retail. So these are all great things. These are all great things, but we're thinking a little bit beyond to say, okay, these things are good, but what about, here, the arcade. I forgot about that. We also do, as urban planners, urban designers, we do scale comparisons. So we were thinking, what will happen if we take the arcade, which is the famous arcade, with its, you see how actually fairly gentle. I mean, there are some parking lots, but it's a very gentle building. It's a kind of fits, within a block. You see it here, and you can walk from here to there. It is a nice little structure. Take the arcade and put it on one of the department stores. So isn't that amazing? It gives you a totally different perspective of the size of these developments. This is the arcade. And then wait for the next one. This is, half of Down City Providence, right there, on the site. Can you imagine? I'm not suggesting you do that. I'm not suggesting do that. Almost, but it is there. It is there. There is great redevelopment here, which is a hotel and some older buildings turned into, I believe, housing, which is amazing, which is great. So, and the main entrance actually is from here. So let me shock you a little bit further. So that's not yet a shocking thing. You see that this is basically a very sparse network. It has basically the Loop Road, which is typical for all the malls, and then inside are driveways and parking lots. So this is the existing, and so this one is keeping the mall, but creating fabric around it. And we were thinking, there was flooding, so why don't we put around on the Loop Road, why don't we make a canal? So you take care of your stormwater in one shot. Whether it's a dream or whatever, but this was just one of the ideas. You do this canal and all of a sudden you have waterfront real estate property for whatever you want, for whatever you want. For housing, let's say, the yellow is maybe housing, the orange is mixed use. You create public spaces here, a little bit of more park, for the stormwater here, and the entry, the Independent Man is still there. We move it a little bit. And then you see how it looks. And then we said, maybe it will be, why don't we open a main street? Here, yes, you have the rain and it's cold and all of that, but you still have your wonderful main streets, the small little streets. So basically the climate is not a reason to have an enclosed big mall. So you basically create a main street in between the anchors. You keep some of the anchors. Usually they are better. They are to go fast, okay? Yes, to go better. Basically, between the anchors, you can create a main street because you have anchors, and then people go in between, and the small businesses, the small tenants can be in the middle. If you need parking, you can put it on the corners, along the corners. And here it is. Again, this is basically Warwick Mall, looking from the east, and how it can look. Why not? Here, you keep the mall, it's right there. See, this is your canal, this is your residential on the canal. Basically you can have an enormous variety of complementary uses, you have the space for those. Definitely you have the space. And then this is option 1, and this is option 2. The one with the main street, you keep the buildings, you create a main street, you have a square here, you have a public space on the river, not a parking lot as it is today. You have also, I'm sure that the people who live to the south, which today they're like, I think there is a fence, will be very happy to be able to be connected with the green streets and pedestrian way to the mall. You can also put solar panels if you want to be fully sustainable as well on the roofs. And then we had another idea. You know, why don't we start very small? Why don't we start with something which is almost like a kind of temporary activation of the parking lots? Here I talked enough about the size of the parking lots which we have in this country, but I'm talking about the parking lot of this particular mall. And not even mention that. This is statistics which, you know, I didn't want to remember, so that's why I put it in a slide. You know, that there were 4,000 people died in 21 on parking lots and non-traffic crashes. Isn't that amazing? 4,000 people, not on the streets. On the streets are probably 20,000 or something. And we're somehow not shocked by statistics like this. So, and we have here, look at this, 2 billion parking spaces. 2 billion parking spaces which are definitely ruining our cities and our suburbs, for that matter, our small towns. So what we thought is like, okay, let's say here we heard that this Apple movie theater or cinema is not doing that well. Maybe we can do something about it and activate the space in front of it. Take, let's say, 6 parking trays, you know, like, see, these are 6 parking trays. These are the trays. And create a little module, and we call it a flexible hospitality module designed for early activation and evolving community use. And it is called a movable feast, a kind of, after Hemingway's novel called The Movable Feast, which is all about France and about Paris. So, you know, not that we compare the parking lot to Paris, but why not? You know, it's basically a little feast which we are moving, you can move around. And so you have basically these buildings, some residential next to it, if it's needed, and it's actually manufactured housing, which is, oh my God, you know, it's maybe oh no, manufactured housing. Actually, that's if you want affordable housing, a lot of it will be manufactured housing. And the recent Senate bill, which whether it will go through or not or whatever. Actually, it went through the Senate, the bipartisan bill, if you have heard about it, talks about manufactured housing, how important it will be to actually provide really affordable housing. The real affordable housing will be most likely manufactured. And these are these little houses which we call the park model because they sit on asphalt and they can be moved around and they're very small. But anyway, these are like starter housing. So the movable feast is a structure which is very, very simple. It is basically food trucks. You know, you put 4 food trucks and you surround them with a beautiful porch. And it's very cheap to build. These are them. You know, they're open because there is like, you know, smoke above. And this is the porch. And it's really civilized place to sit and have different food. As many times you change the food trucks as possible. This is ube night or, tikka masala and all different food options. And of course, I know that you have here in Rhode Island experience with this. But the important thing is to have like a really nice place to sit, you know, and not wait in a line and then ask for the whatever you're ordering like this from the food truck. So anyway, also, this is the movable feast. You know, these are the trucks, and you can put 2 other buildings, whether it's a cafe and a bar or a gym or something like that, to create a public space, a concert venue, a little stage. And then you have the space here on one side. At night, you can have concerts. During the day, why not? You can have volleyball if you want. You know, you put some sand, and this is what can happen. This is for the young people. This is for the younger people who cannot afford to live, in big houses right off the bat. So basically, the park model gives such a possibility. You can see it. It is actually designed in section. It has 2 full bedrooms and 2 full bathrooms and a kind of a nice compact living room kitchen. Here it is. The kid is right there. If you have a kid, you have to be careful not to, the kid to jump. And then, so this is it for the movable feast. Another one, Post Road in North Kingston. So another, a kind of a very wide, big road, a kind of commercial road with some buildings around, some buildings which are either commercial or they're houses which were turned into commercial entities. There is a new housing complex here, and there's some vacant lots. There is a bike path here, and there is a playground as a kind of the playground is here, bike path, and we took about 2,000 feet, and we said, okay, can we do out of Post Road like a main street? What is it going to look like? And we are kind of zoomed into the plan. We drew the streets, and then we said, maybe you can attach the green to become more useful, because if there are streets all around, it may not be so useful. Maybe you can do that. The white are basically the buildings which we keep. We didn't know which buildings are good, which are bad, so we kept most of the buildings. And then we added residential and mixed use, made here a nice, this is a parking lot, so it's a nice entrance to the bike lane, and maybe potential connection to the playground with more connection throughout. Suggestion, the existing conditions, a lot of asphalt, as you can see, and what you have to do is basically parallel parking, a median, wider sidewalks for any kind of human activity. Otherwise, where are the pedestrians? Maybe even the cars are not that many. So it's a kind of a road which is probably useful, or was useful at some point, but today it is not. If you want to attract people to this place and to make it a real main street, you probably have to do that. And this is maybe too much. You say, oh yeah, this is a pie in the sky, this is very ambitious and all of that. However, it has been done in many places. And you can start actually with some of these grants which you have, which I hear, this grant for that and that, for smart growth or for main streets. Usually it's very important to have some early introduction of good infrastructure, and then the private sector will come and fill in the gap. So it has to be obviously a public-private collaboration, if not a real partnership. Historic Main Street in East Greenwich, I wanted to show it because this is US 1. Post Road is US 1 as well. And just to show, if somebody tells you, yeah, but this is US 1, it has to be that big and all of that, this is basically the same street, which I showed you before. And you can see, this is the existing building, still there. This is the historic Main Street. And see, they had, again, sorry, here there are no cars, but the parallel parking is a big feature of a walkable Main Street. Next one is the last example, is the Front Street in Lincoln, which is another, it is basically 10 minutes north of Providence, so it's maybe like a first generation of suburbs with a beautiful historic area, and we focused on the commercial area which is on Front Street. There is like a little alien thing which showed up there, I don't know, in the 70s, I believe, like a little different species, which happened right there, landed. And you can see here I wanted to show you, basically mix of homes and small businesses are here, public housing on this side, shopping center all of a sudden right there. So this is the existing conditions. You see that, there is nice fabric with the historical area here. So it has a great anchor on that side. And then you have this wonderful greenway and potential for other things to happen there. And, the good news is that the right-of-way is not tremendous, so it's not going to be that difficult to convert into a more Main Street character. Beautiful historic building. You have the museum down the road. a very close proximity to nature, as I was saying. This is one big, wonderful characteristic of Rhode Island. And then the existing condition. Here we did basically almost like analysis, inventory of all the buildings. And we are touching or removing at some point only the ones in red. You know, these ones here, 2 or 3, which we felt that maybe you will be willing to depart with in the future. And these ones are basically the pedestrian crossings, which it doesn't look that there are many pedestrians venturing to cross them. So you need your parallel parking, you need the trees, you need the wider sidewalks. This is the fabric, the existing conditions. And here we did basically phasing in 2 or 3 phases, because we know that everything starts incrementally. Do you remember the square which I showed you in Mashpee Commons? This is something like that. It's the same scale. And it's not enough just to do a little square. You need some activation, whether there will be food trucks or pop-up retail or something. We counted, oh, that's very important. Here, 168 parking spots. You have to show everybody, whoever gets into that you are actually either preserving the parking spaces or you're giving more. Just by restructuring the parking lot, providing some on-street parking, actually you can recover the number and provide even more. And this has been done in many cities, if you're interested. And then the next one, phase 2, is you create basically liner buildings, here on the corners, mixed-use building, and with parking underneath along the street, so you don't deprive the parking. Liner buildings, which were actually liner buildings were introduced here first in Providence. You had already liner buildings, very thin buildings, which, a kind of mask parking lots. And this one happens to be in Florida, but basically, see, there is parking underneath, and the corners are better developed, with whether it's residential or whether it's retail on the ground floor, and then the parking is underneath. So this is one idea. You can put this, and then the next step is to infill along the street, and then the last phase is when you have redeveloping even the edge, basically the south edge of this block, and you make full-fledged mixed-use blocks on that side. And it can look something like that. I don't have 3 dimensions for all the phases, but that's kind of the. So this one is, see, this is the shopping center. The next one is just the green. Here's some of the food trucks. This is the shopping center. All the buildings are there. And then the last phase is basically a real Main Street. A real Main Street with parallel parking, with trees, the square, which is on both sides, with habitable active space, residential taking advantage of the wonderful forest in the back, a nicer connection to the housing in the back. You don't need more than that. You also need something which points to a beginning, to a gateway to this space. And it can be, instead of a roundabout, we call roundabouts when traffic goes around. This is like a square about to slow down traffic. And you basically announce to everybody who wants to speed through your Main Street to say, okay, you're arriving here at a place. You're arriving in my town, so I don't want you to speed. You can put another independent man right there, if you would like. Yes, and this is actually the last slide, and I'm only 2 minutes late. And I put this here because you have this little word in your state seal, and it's hope, that there is state motto, which is quite amazing, and as urban designers, we have hope that you're going to retrofit and repair the spots where they need the help. Thank you very much.